In the glittering chaos of a late-night studio, where laughter is currency in truth a fleeting guest, one man's quip ignited a firestorm that would redefine vulnerability on live television. It was a Tuesday night in the heart of New York City, the kind of crisp autumn evening where the city's pulse quickens with unspoken dreams and quiet desperations. Stephen Colbert, the king of satirical jabs, had just unleashed razor-sharp mockery on Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the environmental crusader turned political lightning rod, whose recent vaccine skepticism had become fodder for every comedian's arsenal. RFK Jr., Colbert sneered into the camera, his eyes twinkling with that trademark mischief. "You're like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream, a part whistleblower, part wellness guru, all conspiracy. If your brain were a car, it'd be recalled for faulty wiring." The audience erupted, a wave of applause crashing like thunder, but in the wings, unseen by the roaring crowd, a quiet storm was brewing. Seconds later, John that John, the unassuming producer who'd spent 2 decades stitching the fabric of this very show, stepped into the spotlight, not with a script, but with a soul laid bare. What unfolded next wasn't just a flip of the script, it was a reclamation of humanity in a world too quick to caricature its heroes and villains. To understand the depth of this moment, we have to rewind, peeling back the layers of lives intertwined by ambition, loss, and the relentless grind of public scrutiny. Stephen Colbert wasn't always the polished host wielding words like weapons. Born in the shadow of tragedy, his father and brothers lost in a plane crash when he was just a boy. Stephen grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, where humor became his armor against grief. "Laughter is the sound of the soul catching its breath," he'd once confided in a rare, unguarded interview. But behind the desk, that boy still lingered, wrestling with the fear that every joke masked a deeper ache. Tonight, mocking Kennedy felt like easy sport. RFK Jr., with his Kennedy legacy draped like a heavy cloak, had become a symbol of defiance in an era of division. The son of the assassinated senator, nephew to a president gunned down in Dallas, Bobby Kennedy carried ghosts that whispered of unfinished justice. His pivot to anti-vax advocacy, born from personal anguish over his own child's health struggles, had painted him as a pariah to some, a prophet to others. Colbert's bit was meant to deflate that balloon of controversy, to remind viewers that even icons could be humanized or humbled through humor. The studio lights buzzed approvingly, the band struck a jaunty chord, and for a heartbeat, all was right in the world of late-night levity. But John Hargrove, the man about to shatter the illusion, was no stranger to invisible battles. At 52, with salt and pepper hair and calloused hands from years of hauling cables and cue cards, John was the unsung heartbeat of The Late Show. He'd started as an intern in the Ed Sullivan Theater's dusty basement, fresh out of a community college in Queens, dreaming of directing films that mattered. Life, however, had other scripts. A divorce in his 30s left him raising his daughter, Mia, alone through her leukemia diagnosis at age 7, the endless hospital vigils, and the triumphant remission that came too late to save his marriage. "Producing a show is like parenting," John would say to colleagues over lukewarm coffee, his voice steady but eyes distant. "You fix what's broken, cue the lights, and pray the applause drowns out the doubts." Mia, now 15 and a budding artist with sketches of superheroes battling invisible foes, was his North Star. She'd begged him to fight for the underdogs, the ones the spotlights skipped. And RFK Jr.? To John, he wasn't a punchline. He'd met Bobby once, years ago at a fundraiser for childhood cancer research, where Kennedy's roughly "we have to question everything to protect the ones we love" had mirrored John's own midnight fears during Mia's treatments. That encounter planted a seed, empathy over easy laughs. As Colbert wrapped his segment, chuckling at his own cleverness, the control room hummed with post-bit energy. "Great take, Steve," the director murmured through the earpiece. But John, monitoring from the booth, felt a twist in his gut, a familiar one, like the night Mia's fever spiked and the doctors shrugged off his questions. He glanced at the monitor, Kennedy's face, frozen in a promotional clip, eyes haunted by the weight of a family dynasty fractured by bullets and betrayals. John's hands trembled on the console. This wasn't just comedy, it was erasure, a dismissal of a man's pain wrapped in wit. In that suspended second, as the audience's laughter faded to expectant silence, John made a choice that would echo far beyond the studio walls. He hit the override button, and not for sabotage, but for salvation. The lights dimmed unexpectedly, the band faltered, and John's voice, amplified through the house speakers, cut through like a lifeline tossed into turbulent waters. "Ladies and gentlemen," John began, stepping onto the stage uninvited, his work shirt untucked and voice cracking like thunder in the library. The crowd hushed, Colbert frozen mid-smile, a deer in unexpected headlights. "I know this is Stephen's show, and God knows he's better at this than I'll ever be. But tonight, I can't let that moment pass without saying something real." He paused, scanning the faces of tourists wide-eyed, regulars leaning forward, crew members exchanging stunned glances. Stephen, ever the pro, gestured welcomingly, but his brow furrowed with a mix of curiosity and concern. This was uncharted territory. Late night thrived on control, not chaos. John's heart pounded, memories flooding, Mia's tiny hand in his during chemo, the way Kennedy's words had given him permission to rage against the system that profited from silence. "Mr. Kennedy isn't just a headline or a hashtag," John continued, his voice gaining steel. "He's a father who's buried doubts and dug up truths because he had to for his kids, for all of us. I've been there. My daughter, she fought cancer when she was 7. Doctors said trust the science, and I did. But I also questioned everything, the drugs, the delays, the way Big Pharma hides behind white coats. Mockery. It stings when it's aimed at the scars you can't see." The studio, once a cauldron of canned glee, transformed into a confessional. Whispers rippled through the seats. A woman in the third row dabbed her eyes, remembering her own child's illness. A young man in the back nodded, his vaccine hesitancy born not of folly, but fear after losing a sibling to a rare reaction. Stephen, sensing the shift, didn't interrupt. Instead, he pulled up a stool, his comedian's mask slipping to reveal the apathetic interviewer beneath. "John," he said softly, mic in hand, "this isn't the plan. But hell, maybe it's better." What followed was no scripted redemption arc, but a raw, meandering dialogue that peeled back the veneers of all involved. Kennedy himself, tipped off by a producer's frantic text, joined via satellite from his Massachusetts home. He disheveled in a flannel shirt, eyes red-rimmed from another long night poring over studies. "I'm no saint," Bobby admitted, his voice gravelly with the Kennedy cadence, yet stripped of bravado. "Losing my dad. It taught me power corrupts, and silence kills. When my son got hurt, I didn't trust blindly anymore. But I'm not anti-science, I'm pro-truth." John's challenges poured out. Dana, the financial ruin of Mia's treatments, the isolation of single parenthood, the guilt of laughing along to bits that trivialized suffering. "We build these walls of wood," he said, turning to Stephen, "because it's safer than feeling. But what if we let the feeling in? What if we end this show not with a punchline, but a promise?" The emotional crescendo built like a symphony refusing to fade. Stephen, drawing from his own well of loss, shared a story he'd buried for years, the plane crash that orphaned his youth, the faith he clung to like a frayed rope. "Humor's my way of saying, this hurts, but we're in it together," he confessed, his voice breaking for the first time on air. Relatable in his unraveling, Stephen became not the mocker, but the mirror reflecting the viewer's own fragile facades. Kennedy, too, softened, recounting the brotherly bond with his late siblings, the environmental fights that felt like tilting at windmills. Challenges mounted in real time, online trolls swarmed the live feed, decrying the woke hijack. Ratings dipped momentarily as commercials loomed. Yet resolutions emerged organically, like dawn after a vigil. John proposed a pact on air, Unpolished are pledging the show's resources to a fund for families questioning medical norms without shame. Stephen committed, matching donations. Kennedy offered his network of advocates. Mia, patched in from home via FaceTime, sketched live on a tablet, a superhero. Kennedy, Colbert as the jester knight, John as the quiet guardian. Her laughter, pure and piercing, dissolved the tension, reminding everyone that children don't mock, they meant. As the clock ticked toward blackout, the pace of the night had slowed to a deliberate heartbeat. The conversations lingering, silences honored, the band's soft piano underscoring the vulnerability. No viral clips were edited for bite. This was the full, unhurried unraveling, clocking in at a soul-stirring 15 minutes that felt like a lifetime. John, backlit by the stage lights, closed with a nod to the camera. We flipped the script tonight because scripts lie. Life's messier, braver. To everyone watching who's ever felt mocked for your pain, your questions aren't crazy, they're courageous. Let's end not divided, but daring to connect. The credits rolled to applause that swelled from polite to profound, the audience rising as one. Stephen hugged John off stage, whispering, "You just directed the best episode we never planned." In the days that followed, the moment tripled outward, a stone skip across a divided pond. Viewers flooded inboxes with stories, nurses exhausted by doubt, parents grateful for grace, skeptics softened by shared scars. The fund raised millions, bridging labs and living rooms in a quest for transparent health. John returned to the shadows, but Mia's artwork became the show's new logo, a talisman against cynicism. Stephen's monologues gained a gentler edge. Kennedy's voice found new allies in unlikely corners. And through it all, a truth endured. In a world scripted for spectacle, the real power lies in pausing the punchline to hear the heartbeat. So here's to flipping the script, and not to win, but to heal. Because when we choose empathy over easy laughs, we don't just end a show, we rewrite the human story, one vulnerable second at a time.